Welcome to the fourth day of the fourth week learning on social entrepreneurship and sustainability. Today, let us understand the challenges the social entrepreneurs face in the context of implementing SDGs. The Sustainable Development Goals in India are not just a policy agenda, they are a governance stress across ministries, sectors, and every level of the state. We have aligned the vision, but the real question is, can our system deliver coherently, quickly, and fairly? Today, let us face four hard truths and chart a practical way forward. The SDGs are interconnected, but our governance often is not. We face two kinds of fragmentation. The first being horizontal fragmentation. At the center, ministries still tend to work in silos. One ministry may push livelihood programs under SDG 1, while another defends ecosystem protection under SDG 15. Without structured coordination, their projects can collide on the ground. For example, a new road that boosts income and connectivity but cuts through forests and displaces communities because livelihoods, land, and environment were never planned together. Overlapping schemes can on renewable energy, clean cooking, efficiency often compete for attention and funds instead of reinforcing each other. The next being vertical misalignment. Policy is framed at the center, but implementation lives in states, and outcomes show up in districts and villages. Some states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh, have clear SDG frameworks and institutional capacity. Others struggle with weaker systems and thin data. For cross boundary issues like rivers, air quality, energy grids, and climate, interstate coordination is still too thin. What works? Interministerial task forces that actually meet and decide, joint budgeting for cross sector missions, integrated planning where ministries, states, and local bodies are treated as independent, not isolated. Data deficits. What we can't measure, we can't manage. Right now, India's SDG data ecosystem is fragmented, delayed, and often too aggregated to act on. Multiple agencies collect data: NSSO, NFHS, sectoral departments, each with different methodologies, cycles, and quality standards. The result? Indicators are stitched together with time lags, making it hard to track progress in anything close to real time. Second, lack of disaggregation. The SDGs promise to leave no one behind. That requires knowing who is being left behind. Yet, we often lack disaggregated data by gender, caste, tribe, disability, income, and district. National averages can look impressive, while specific districts, castes, or hamlets remain locked out of progress. Need for data innovation. We need to shift from episodic surveys to real time interoperable platforms. Use geospatial tools, satellite imagery, and administrative data to track land use, water bodies, crop patterns, and urban growth. Build platforms that are real time, disaggregated, interoperable, open with strong privacy safeguards. Open data, done right, allows citizens, researchers, and innovators to monitor, question, and improve SDG delivery. Local governments' constraints. The SDGs succeed or fail in panchayats and city halls, not just in national capitals. But many Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies face deep constraints in the form of limited technical capacity, staff shortages, and very thin finances. The 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments promised devolution of power through functions, functionaries, and finances. But on the ground, this devolution remains uneven and incomplete. Institutional weaknesses. Gram Panchayat development plans and city development plans often lack SDG linked indicators, lack planning tools and data, and lack real autonomy to reprioritize in line with the local needs. To localize the SDGs, we must empower local governments, provide predictable, untied funds for flexible, locally relevant action, create technical cells at district level for planning, monitoring and evaluation, and climate resilience, train elected representatives and staff at scale in planning, budgeting, social inclusion, and risk management. Models like the Aspirational Districts program show what is possible, that is, data driven, locally adapted, constantly learning systems. We still tend to reward inputs and outputs, not outcomes. Houses built, they're not yielding housing security. Toilets built, but they're not ensuring usage, dignity, and better health. Many schemes only count rupees spent, assets created, activities completed, but not changes in people's lives. Budgets are rarely tied to clear SDG outcomes. Dashboards remain parallel, not integrated, with weak links to planning and finance. For SDG 6, for example, counting toilets tells us little about water reliability, safe sludge management, or reduction in diarrheal diseases. Different ministries run separate MIS system. Niti Aayog's SDG India Index brings transparency and sparks healthy competition among states. But still, we lack a multi tiered architecture that connects national goals with state plans, in turn, with district indicators and community feedback. Accountability is not just about top down audits, it also means social audits, citizen scorecards, independent evaluations, and routine legislative review of SDG performance. Civil society, academia, and the private sector must be partners in data validation, evaluation, and feedback. So, what is the way forward? We should think of 5 system shifts to move from intent to impact. First being institutional integration, creating standing inter-ministerial SDG councils and joint key performance indicators and pooled funds for cross-cutting priorities like climate resilience, urbanization, and nutrition. Mandate state SDG task forces to align schemes, climate action plans, and spatial plans so that roads, rivers, forests, and cities are planned together. Second shift, data strengthening. Build a national SDG data spine, which is interoperable, application programming interface, and privacy preserving. Make district level disaggregated indicators the norm with open data sets that come with clear quality notes so that users know what they are looking at. The third shift, decentralization with teeth. Operationalize the three F's, that is, functions, functionaries, and finances. For PRIs and ULBs in practice, not just on paper. Establish district SDG cells, fund urban and GP data fellows, roll out planning toolkits that embed SDG indicators into GPDPs and city plans. The fourth shift, outcome based governance. Convert major schemes into result frameworks with outcome KPIs and mid year reviews. Link performance grants to verified outcomes in health, learning, water, air quality, and waste management. The fifth shift, participatory accountability. Scale social audits, citizen report cards, and community monitoring. Institutionalize parliamentary and assembly SDG reviews with public dashboards so that citizens can see who is progressing and where course action is needed. Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals is not only a policy problem, it is an economics problem of how we mobilize and deploy capital at scale. For a country as large and diverse as India, the challenge is monumental. We have built ambitious schemes, we have shown strong intent, but the financing gap between vision and resources is still wide. Today, let's unpack four realities and then map a pathway from resource dependence to resource intelligence. Limits of public expenditure estimates suggest India needs around 500 to 600 US billion dollar every year to meet the SDGs by 2030. Current public spending across health, education, infrastructure, social protection covers only about 60 to 70% of that. That leaves a financing gap of roughly 200 to 300 US billion dollars every year. Why this constraint? High competing priorities like food security, welfare, defense, growing debt service and subsidies that compress fiscal space, public spending on health and education, though improving, still trails global benchmark. Climate adaptation and mitigation needs long term capital with additional needs estimated in the tens of billions annually. The COVID-19 pandemic deepened these pressures. Emergency relief, health infrastructure, and stimulus packages were absolutely essential, but they also stretched budgets and slowed progress on gender equality, climate action, and poverty reduction. When money is tight, every rupee must count. That means cost benefit discipline, performance based budgeting, and outcome linked finance that prioritizes interventions with the highest social and environmental returns. There have been overlaps and inefficiencies in the public schemes. India's SDG strategy leans heavily on government led schemes. That is both a strength and a strain. Multiple ministries run schemes with similar objectives of livelihoods through MGNREGA, National Rural Livelihood Mission, PMEGP, all aiming at income security and jobs, but often with fragmented delivery and overlapping beneficiaries. Clean energy and efficiency, several schemes housed in different ministries that concentrate on renewables, clean cooking, energy efficiency, but with limited convergence in design and monitoring. This duplication dilutes accountability, creates administrative burden, and spreads scarce resources too thin. Next being the inefficient fund utilization. Even where resources are allocated, fund utilization is uneven because of procedural bottlenecks, complex guidelines, and limited local capacity. All of these contribute to unspent balances in critical sectors ranging from rural development to sanitation and health. Top down design can also miss district realities. Centrally sponsored schemes may not fully align with local SDG localization strategies or community priorities. The answer is not always new schemes. It is better convergence and smarter financing. Pool funds across ministries where objectives overlap. Create joint programs with shared indicators. Use results based disbursements tied to measurable outcomes, not just physical outputs. Role and current limits. The private sector is critical for capital, innovation, and efficiency. But today, corporate alignment with the SDG often stops at compliance or philanthropy rather than shaping core business strategy. CSR is valuable but limited. India's CSR mandate, that is about 2% of profits for large firms, channels an estimated 2 to 3 billion dollars US billion dollars annually into education, health, sanitation and environmental projects. Valuable, yes, but funds are frequently fragmented across many small projects. There is a visible urban and industrial area bias. Only a fraction of CSR portfolios are explicitly mapped to SDG indicators or measured for long term impact. CSR must evolve from check writing to strategic social investment. That means pooled funds for large scale, high impact projects, a clear theory of change and SDGs tagging, third party measurement and independent evaluations, partnerships with government and communities to ensure solutions are locally rooted and sustainable. Beyond CSR, we need blended public private partnerships where public or philanthropic capital de risks private investment in sectors essential to SDGs that are spread on renewables and storage, waste and circular economy, water and sanitation, affordable housing, health, and education. To bridge the SDG financing gap, India must move from isolated pilots to a playbook of scalable financial instruments that crowd in private capital. Green bonds. Green bonds raise debt specifically for environmentally sustainable projects. India has emerged as a leading emerging market issuer with cumulative issuances now crossing roughly 25 US billion dollar. These bonds finance renewable energy, sustainable transport, climate resilient infrastructure. What are the next steps? A stronger SDG and green taxonomy, independent verification and impact reporting, and clear project pipelines to deepen investor confidence. Blended finance uses concessional public or philanthropic capital to de risk projects and attract commercial investment into high impact underserved sectors that include rural health and diagnostics, climate smart agriculture, and smart irrigation, water and sanitation system, smallholder value chains, institutions like NABARD, SIDBI, and NIIF working with multilaterals such as the World Bank and UN agencies can anchor blended platforms that scale across states and sectors. Social and development impact bonds and impact investing. Social and development impact bonds like SIBs and DIBs flip the traditional model. Investors fund programs upfront. Governments or donors repay them only if results are achieved. India's first DIB in 2015 focused on improving learning outcomes for girls, demonstrated that pay for success can work in our context. Meanwhile, the broader impact investing sector in India has attracted more than 15 US billion dollar since 2010, funding affordable housing, health, education, agriculture, and clean energy with both financial returns and measurable impact, social impact. So, what is the way forward to move from resource scarcity to resource intelligence? India needs a whole of system approach. We need to strengthen the public finance, converge schemes with shared objectives and reduce duplication, adopt outcome budgeting with mid-year performance reviews, tighten public financial management to improve utilization and reduce leakages, scale the ESG linked lending, sustainability linked loans, and transition finance, create visibility, gap, and first loss facilities for key SDG sectors, standardize SDG impact metrics for banks, NBFCs, and corporates so capital knows where it is making a difference. Expand the innovative instruments, mainstream the green and social bonds at national and state levels, build blended finance platforms anchored by DFIs and multilaterals, use guarantees and credit enhancements to unlock long term institutional investors such as pension funds, insurance, and sovereign funds, build capacity and literacy, train the government officials, district financial institutions, panchayat raj institutions, urban local bodies in SDG finance, project structuring, and impact measurement, support the project preparation facilities to build a robust pipeline of bankable SDG aligned projects, launch a national SDG finance dashboard to track flows, projects, and outcomes across public, private, and blended finance, mandate independent verification and open data on SDG linked spending and performance. India's story today is one of contrasts. A nation growing rapidly, transforming, innovating, aspiring. Yet, beneath that growth lies another story of inequality, unemployment, and environmental stress that threaten to undo our progress. We have lifted millions out of poverty. We have expanded education, improved health, and advanced technology. And yet, the benefits have not reached everyone equally. This is the paradox of growth without full inclusion, and the central challenge for achieving the sustainable developmental goals. Over the last 3 decades, India cut extreme poverty dramatically from around 45% in the mid 1990s to less than 12% today. That is historic progress. But if you look beyond income, multi-dimensional poverty, that is deprivation in education, health, and living standards, still affects over 230 million people. So yes, GDP has grown, but growth alone has not been enough because inequality has widened. The top 10% now hold over 70% of national wealth. The gains of globalization and technology have flowed more to the urban, skilled, and well connected than to the informal workers, small farmers, or rural laborers. And even as the economy expands, jobs have not kept pace. We call this jobless growth, where automation, informality, and a sluggish manufacturing sector limit opportunities for secure, decent work. Sustainable development cannot be just about a higher number. It must be about shared prosperity, decent work, and equal opportunity. That is the heart of SDG number 1, SDG number 8, and SDG 10. Half of India's population remains underrepresented in the workforce. Women's labor force participation still hovers around 1 in 4, among the lowest in the world. Despite better education and health, barriers persist in the form of unpaid heavy care work, wage gaps, concerns over safety and mobility, and workplaces that are not built for women's realities. In leadership, the gap widens. Only about 14% of members of parliament are women. Fewer than 1 in 10 board members in top companies are women. Patriarchal norms, early marriage, and gender based violence still limit women's choices, voice, and economic independence. But here is the truth: empowering women is not charity, it's a strategy. Estimates suggest that closing the gender gap could add hundreds of billions of dollars to India's GDP by 2030. So, gender equality is not just SDG 5, it is an accelerator goal. When women thrive, education improves, health outcomes strengthen, poverty falls, and growth rises. We need childcare and safe transport, digital inclusion and skills, gender budgeting, and women led enterprises at scale. India's SDG map tells two stories. On one side, states like Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, Tamil Nadu are the front runners in health, education, and social indicators. On the other side, Bihar, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh are still struggling to meet basic benchmarks on learning levels, health infrastructure, and jobs. The SDG India Index captures this very clearly. Kerala scores above 75, a front runner. Bihar scores below 55, still a performer. These are not just numbers, they represent real gaps in opportunity, capacity, and governance. Some regions carry historical disadvantages in the form of lower literacy, weaker industrial base, higher fertility, and more fragile institutions. Fiscal constraints make it harder for lagging states to invest in health, education, and infrastructure at the scale required. Bridging these gaps demands targeted fiscal transfers, capacity building, region specific development strategies, and strong data driven planning. The Aspirational District Program is one such model using real time data, local innovation, and continuous monitoring to lift 112 of the most backward districts. India's growth has come with a high environmental cost. We are among the world's top greenhouse gas emitters. Many of the most polluted cities on the planet are here. Air, water, and soil pollution harm lives and livelihoods every single day. Forests shrink, biodiversity erodes, groundwater drops, rivers run dirtier, and the climate grows more unpredictable. Floods, droughts, heat waves, and cyclones are becoming more frequent and intense. India now ranks among the most climate vulnerable countries globally. And who suffers most? Not the insulated few, but small farmers, urban poor, coastal and tribal communities, those with the least buffer and the fewest options. This crisis cuts across SDG 13 on climate action, SDG 15 on life on land, SDG 16 on clean water, SDG 2 of zero hunger, and loops back to poverty and inequality. Our challenge is dual: to sustain economic momentum without destroying the ecological foundations that sustain us. In that way, India has taken important steps. The National Action Plan on Climate Change, leading the International Solar Alliance, and the National Green Hydrogen Mission, and programs for clean air and sustainable mobility. But we need stronger enforcement of environmental norms, faster expansion of renewables, circular economy models for waste and resources, and local adaptation plans that help communities cope with heat floods and crop stress. India is urbanizing faster than ever. By 2035, nearly 600 million people, that is about 40% of the population, will live in cities. Cities are our economic engines, driving more than 60% of GDP. But they also magnify inequality and stress. Informal workers, migrant laborers, and slum dwellers face insecure housing, limited sanitation, and fragile livelihoods. Infrastructure struggles to keep up, mounting traffic congestion, waste, water scarcity, heat islands, and frequent flooding in many urban centers. The COVID 19 lockdowns revealed this fragility starkly as millions of urban workers walk back to villages unprotected by social security nets. If planned well, cities can become engines of inclusion and innovation. Programs like Smart Cities and Amrit must embed sustainability at their core, involving mass public transport and walkable streets, green buildings and cooling, affordable, dignified housing, climate resilient urban planning for heat waves, floods, and rising pollution. This is the front line for SDG number 11 of sustainable cities and SDG 6 of water and sanitation. India's vision of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas must now evolve into Sabka Vikas, Sabka Prakriti Sanrakshan, which involves inclusive development with environmental stewardship at its core. Sustainable development is not just an economic project, it is a civilizational promise to grow without greed, to prosper without exclusion, and to thrive without destroying what sustains us. Have you ever wondered why some government programs, no matter how well funded or well designed, still struggle to deliver results? It's not always about money or policy or even political will. Sometimes it's about the means of delivery. How we deliver matters just as much as what we deliver. And in India's journey towards the sustainable developmental goals, that how depends on three interlinked forces: access to technology, capability of institutions, and the behavior of people. Let's explore how these come together and how, when misaligned, they quietly limit progress, even in the best intentioned programs. India has built one of the world's largest digital public infrastructures that includes identity, payments, data exchange, which forms the backbone of a digital nation. And yet, millions remain on the wrong side of the digital divide. We often talk about the four A's: availability, affordability, accessibility, and ability. Each reveals a different face of exclusion. Rural and remote habitations still face inconsistent last mile broadband. Networks exist on a map, but telehealth calls drop, online classes buffer, and e governance portals time out just when a form is being submitted. Fiber may reach the Gram Panchayat building, yet quality of service in the household remains patchy due to power cuts, weak backhaul, and limited maintenance. Even with some of the world's cheapest data, the cost of a smartphone, its repair, and eventual replacement is a serious barrier. Many families share a single device. Often, women and students get second hand access, borrowing phones, rationing screen time, squeezing learning and services into someone else's schedule. Most apps quietly assume you can read in English on a touchscreen. But if you are non literate, what if you rely on a feature phone? What if you are visually impaired or hard of hearing? A text heavy, English first app is for millions a closed door, not a service. Even when people do have devices and data, they may not know how to use them safely, how to navigate complex menus, upload documents, detect fraud, or trust that their data will not be misused. Without guidance and grievance redress, digital rails feel risky and people quietly opt out. And so, technology meant to empower ends up excluding many who need it most. This digital gap does not just affect tech access, it slows down progress on health, that is SDG 3, education is SDG 4, gender equality is SDG 5, and decent work of SDG 8, and strong institutions SDG 16. So, what is the fix? Not just more bandwidth, but more human bandwidth. Lost mile reliability, that includes community Wi Fi, public hotspots, shared towers, local maintenance contracts, solar backups for network sites. And what is there for acceptable access? Device financing or subsidies for students and women, refurbished device supply chains, local repair skilling that also creates green jobs. And what's there for an inclusive design? Default voice, vernacular first, offline first apps, large fonts, high contrast, screen reader compatibility, plain language forms. What is there for assisted service rails? Stronger CSR networks, SHG, run help desk, tele facilitators, community digital navigators who sit beside citizens and help them transact with confidence. And what is there for data rights and safety? Privacy by design, clear consent notices in local languages, simple grievance paths, and cyber hygiene campaigns. When we move from just availability to genuine ability and trust, digital public infrastructure stops being a silent barrier and becomes a powerful enabler of SDG delivery. The missing capability stack policies are only as strong as the institutions that deliver them. And too often, our local systems are running on outdated hardware, not the computers, but the human capability stack. Districts and local bodies are asked to do more than ever: plan complex projects, procure technology, manage vendors, interpret data dashboards, and protect citizen data, often without the training, tools, or continuity to match. So many schemes are copied from central templates, often with limited diagnosis of local problems or beneficial journeys. So, what is the result? Technically sound but socially misfitting programs. So, tendering is still rewards the lowest bid, not the best outcome. Service levels are vaguely defined. Contracts lack clear performance clauses, and weak contract management leads to delays, overruns, or under delivery. Dashboards exist on big screens at the district headquarters, but data literacy is uneven. Frontline staff often see MIS entry as compliance, not as a tool for spotting gaps and course correcting. Digitization changes workflows, but without process redesign, training, and incentives, staff revert to paper. Frequent transfers erase institutional memory. Every few months, the system reboots with a new officer. So, as local bodies handle more sensitive data, many lack protocols for backups, role based access, incident response, or continuity after a breach. All of these weakens outcomes across SDG 1, 3, 4, 6, 11, and 16 because benefits leak at the planning, procurement, and monitoring stages. Imagine a district officer asked to procure an e learning platform. They have never written a performance based contract, never analyzed learning outcomes, never managed a tech vendor. How can they make it truly work for children? That's why we need a capability stack, a system that equips officials not just to respond but to design, buy, and deliver better. What does that look like in practice? Competency frameworks for district officials in planning, public private partnerships, outcome based procurement, data use, cyber hygiene. Training of officers, pipelines, and blended prep learning via platforms like iGot, backed by hands on clinics and mentoring. Dedicated digital and data cadres at state and district level, which includes product managers, data analysts, contract managers who serve multiple departments. Open source and modular tech with standard SLAs and template RFPs focused on outcomes to avoid vendor lock ins. Communities often practice district learning from districts, sharing the playbook, casebooks, and what didn't work stories. So, institutional memory systems that should include versioned SOPs, decision logs, reusable components. When local institutions become learning organizations, governance stops being routine implementation and starts becoming continuous improvement and transformation. Here is the truth we don't say often enough. No SDG can succeed if people don't believe in it. We have seen this story many times. Toilets built but not used, vaccines available but appointments skipped, waste bins distributed but segregation ignored. The barrier is not just infrastructure, it's behavior. Many programs still rely on traditional information education communication that includes posters, slogans, one way advertisements. Those can inform but rarely transform. Effective social and behavior change communication works differently. It blends emotion that includes stories that move people, identity that people like us do things like this, and social proof. Most families in our lane now segregate wastes. When your neighbor says, everyone in our ward now separate waste, you should too, that is a social norming in action. Behavioral design that includes nudges, reminders, and defaults turn awareness into action. Add choice architecture, which includes opt out defaults for waste bins, SMS reminders for vaccination dates, pre filled forms for renewals, and you reduce friction without taking away agency. Add community ownership that includes school eco clubs tracking water and waste, ward sabhas discussing local SDG dashboards, SHG members monitoring nutrition, toilets, or savings, youth groups running climate or road safety campaigns, and programs stop being government budgets, they become people's movements. Across education, gender equality, health, and climate, we need this behavioral lens. What we need is curriculum and clubs that includes service learning credits, citizen science on air and water quality, gamified dashboards, public leaderboards for ward level segregation, water saving, and energy efficiency. Simple, dignified service journeys that includes one-stop apps and kiosks, multilingual IVR, assisted help, and targeting that does not stigmatize people. And in a world of misinformation, we need rapid myth busting toolkits for frontline workers, partnerships with local influencers and vernacular media so that rumors don't derail public health or climate action. When programs are co created with communities and shaped around real human behavior, implementation becomes partnership, not just delivery. The cautions that we should exercise in the case of tech solutionism, exclusion, and trust. We should pause before celebrating the power of technology because tech alone is not the answer. Digital rails can amplify good design, but they cannot fix weak institutions or poorly designed processes. If we rush into mandatory eKYC, app only applications, GPS tagged photos, and algorithm based eligibility without offline or assisted alternatives, we risk baking exclusion into the system. Inclusion must be a design principle, not an afterthought. There are three cross cutting risks we must keep in view: technology solutionism, assuming a portal or app can solve problems rooted in capacity, incentives, or trust. Start with the user's problem, not with the tool. Exclusion by design. Whenever a digital step is mandatory, there must be an equivalent offline or assisted path. No person should lose a benefit because a battery died or a server crashed. Data protection and algorithmic bias. As we collect more data and automate more decisions, we must prioritize privacy by design, data minimization, audit trails, and fairness checks on eligibility or prioritization models. Visible grievance redress is central to trust. Privacy, consent, fairness, these are not luxuries for later. They are the foundations of long term adoption. Without trust, people will step away from systems exactly when we need them to lean in. The Sustainable Development Goals, our shared blueprint for people, planet, and prosperity, were born in a time of hope. But today, we pursue them in a world that feels very different. A world more divided, a more crisis driven, and less cooperative than the one imagined in 2015. COVID 19, wars, debt distress, climate extremes all have reshaped the global landscape. Even countries with strong domestic policies face global headwinds that includes tightening finance, trade barriers, and shrinking room to maneuver. That is why geopolitics now matters for the SDGs, because the fate of the local progress increasingly depends on the fairness of the global system. Why geopolitics matters for the SDGs? Let's start with the basics. The SDGs rest on three global levers: access to finance and markets, access to climate and technology flows, and resilience to global shocks. When any one of these falters, even the best designed local efforts stumble. So, if you want to understand SDG progress in India, we can't just look at schemes and state budgets. We also have to look beyond our borders at how global rules on money, markets, climate, and technology are changing. Is the lane between the developmental aid and trade barriers is narrowing? Yes. Developmental aid is at record levels, over $220 billion in 2023. But dig deeper, and a different story emerges. Much of that aid is crisis driven, spent on refugee costs and emergency relief in donor countries themselves, not the steady, predictable funding that builds schools, hospitals, or clean energy grids over decades. Quantity has risen, but the quality of support for long term development has eroded. At the same time, global trade, that is the engine that lifted millions out of poverty, is hitting new walls in the form of export restrictions, new industrial subsidies, security driven trade measures. These are fragmenting the very markets that developing countries rely on for growth, jobs, and affordable technology. UN and WTO reports call this the narrowing external lane, where development, finance, and open trade no longer move in sync. For India and many peers, it is not just about less aid, it's about less accessible, less stable global opportunities. When aid money is tied up in emergencies and trade is tangled in new barriers, the external room for SDG progress shrinks, even if domestic intentions are strong. So, the gap behind the climate finance and technology transfer. Nowhere is this imbalance clear than in climate finance. The world finally crossed the long promised $100 billion mark in 2022, mobilizing roughly $115 billion for climate action. It's a symbolic milestone. But here is the catch: much of that is loans, not grants. Access is tangled in complex applications and red tape. And adaptation, making people safer from floods, droughts, heat waves, still gets a smaller slice than mitigation. At COP28, countries launched a loss and damage fund, a breakthrough in principle, acknowledging that some climate impacts go beyond adaptation. But initial contributions are tiny compared to the scale of damages that climate vulnerable countries face. And technology transfer, still slowed by intellectual property walls, limited flexibilities for essential health and climate technologies, and business models that keep critical know how locked up. So, what is the lesson? Finance alone is not enough. We need fair terms and open technologies. India's role here is pivotal for pushing for more grant based climate and adaptation finance, for open standards in renewables and health technology, and for co development models where Indian labs, universities, and startups co create solutions rather than just buy them off the shelf. In simple terms, we don't just need more money and technology, we need them on fairer, more workable terms. The UN's 2024 SDG report shows that only about 17% of global SDG targets are on track. That is not just a statistic, it is a warning. COVID 19 alone reversed years of gains in action, education, gender, equality, and health. Conflicts have displaced millions, and debt burdens have surged, with developing countries owing around $11.7 trillion externally. Budgets meant for classrooms and clinics are now paying for interests and imports. Even as multilateral development banks try to expand their lending, the needs are outpacing the supply. Every new crisis steals oxygen from long term sustainability. If each shock forces governments to slash investments in learning, recovery, primary healthcare, and resilient infrastructure, we risk getting stuck in a vicious cycle. Low resilience, more damage, more debt, less room for SDGs. That is why India and the world must build systems that protect SDG investments even in crisis. So, what this means for India's SDG strategy? And in a fragmented world, India has to defend its developmental space while global rules are in flux. First, trade diplomacy must keep value chains open, especially for clean technologies, critical minerals, and pharma inputs and active pharmaceutical ingredients. We need diversified markets, deeper south to south ties, and a voice in setting standards so that green rules do not become hidden trade barriers. Second, India should champion debt for climate swaps and disaster clauses so that when a cyclone hits or a drought strikes, fiscal space for SDG investment is not wiped out by debt service. Third, the quality of finance matters as much as the quantity. We need more grants and low cost, long tenure loans. faster access and simpler rules in climate and SDG funds, and climate finance that supports schools and clinics staying open, not just solar parks being built. Fourth, technology partnerships should move from transfer to co development, where Indian research institutions and startups help design the next generation of solar modules and storage, green hydrogen solutions, affordable diagnostics and vaccines. Finally, we must build shock absorbers into India's SDG system, like automatic stabilizers, which include scalable cash transfers, contingency credit lines that trigger in disasters, parametric insurance that pays out when a rainfall or wind crosses certain thresholds. These tools won't stop crises from happening, but they can stop each crisis from wiping out years of development work. So, how the India can champion a cooperative agenda? So, the world is looking for a bridge, and India can be that bridge between developed and developing economies, between growth and sustainability, between ambition and action. What might such a cooperative agenda look like? Rebalance aid towards long-term sustainable development sectors that includes health systems, foundational learning, water, sanitation, and not just short-term crisis response. Scale climate finance beyond the 100 billion marker with a bigger share for adaptation and more grant based support. And with the loss and damage fund truly operational, not symbolic. Keep trade open for development, especially for green goods, digital services, and affordable medicines. Accelerate the MDB reforms so that each public dollar leverages several dollars of private and institutional capital for resilient infrastructure and social sectors. In short, protect policy space at home, expand development space abroad, and make global rules work for people, not just for markets. The future is not something we simply inherit. It is something we build together, one decision, one partnership, one community at a time. That is how we move from commitments to coherence, from promises to progress, and from progress to purpose. Thank you for watching the video.